I think it's important just to get in the record because of this very distinguished panel that we are in a threatened position today in this country, and times have changed from the past. We had a hearing, I chair the Readiness Subcommittee, about last week. We had the vice chiefs come in, and it's a pretty sobering experience there, and they made their testimony, such as General Allen said, we've had most of our modernization programs on life support for the last several years. Currently, our modernization is 50% of what it was in 2009. We had, it was General Wilson, and this is a quote that he said, at the very bottom of what we call the hollow force of the 1970s, pilots were flying 15 sorties a month, about 20 hours. Today, we're flying less hours, less sorties than we did in the 1970s. He was saying, essentially, we have a hollow force today, and we have to recognize that. And the first question I'd ask you, probably in anticipation of this, you read some of the statements that were made by the four vice chiefs, and if so, do you agree pretty much with them? Starting.
Senator Inhofe, I do agree. And some of this is probably unavoidable as a result of 15 years of heavy use of the force in ongoing operations. Some of it is certainly related to budget constraints that have been placed on the force by the Budget Control Act.
Yeah.
But we absolutely do need to get our men and women in uniform and our units the training and resources they need to be at their peak level of readiness.
Thank you very much. The rest of you generally agree with them? Yes, Mr.
Yes, sir, Senator. One thing I'd add, though, is part of the reason we have this readiness problem is we don't have the time for the forces to train and maintain between deployments. And the other part is the budget uncertainty, not so much the lack of money overall, it's the fact you can't plan your maintenance in advance and then budget to it and carry it out. And so as a result, you have to do maintenance on an emergent basis, or it's insufficiently planned, which causes growth. So it increases the cost, and then you do less work in the end.
Yeah, but of course, if you're in a period, as we have been, starving the military, the first thing that goes is maintenance and modernization, because that's less visible out there. Now, you, Mr. Clark, mentioned just a minute ago, it was you that said it'd take at least a decade preparing right now for what we're going to try to have for the future to face these threats that are coming. And I think, Mr. Thomas, you also made reference to it taking a decade. It reminds me a little bit of my last year on the House Armed Services Committee. Before I came to the Senate, we had someone testify, this is 1994, that in 10 years we'd no longer need ground troops. So it kind of puts us in a situation, if it's going to be 10 years, what do we prepare for today? That's a problem. Now, the one agreement, and I think it's very significant that we get this in the record from the four of you, now you've already done it, I think, in your opening statements and in your responses, is you're looking very much at forward deployment, and I think we all agree that that's necessary. We remember also, it was back in the 90s during the Clinton administration that the emphasis was the other way. In our political system, something you folks don't have to deal with, but we do, people, when they start talking about going through a BRAC round, they said, fine, just don't do it here at home, do it overseas. Well, that's what happened. I often think, I remember when Vicenza was under attack, that was in Italy, and it was one of them that was going to be reduced down in the process of a BRAC round. Now, we all remember what happened. We were trying to get troops into Iraq, and we were not able to take them on the ground through Turkey, and so Vicenza came through. Well, if that had been bad weather at that time, we couldn't have done it. So we went in, and it was like, it was very difficult to do, but we rebuilt in Aviano the capability of sending these kids in no matter what the weather conditions and all that. So I'm saying that I agree wholeheartedly. I disagreed back in the 90s when the reverse was true. And I'd like to have each one of you make a comment as to the necessity for the forward deployment, anything you haven't already said, so it'll be in the record, starting with you, Mr.
Senator Inhofe, our alliance relationships and the integrity of those security commitments that we give to our allies are the bedrock of our national security strategy. If we're going to influence events in Eurasia, which have the potential to directly affect the security and well-being of Americans, it's important that those security alliances be viable. Forward station U.S. forces are both a tangible demonstration of the U.S. will and ability to defend common interests abroad, and they are the advanced lead elements of our initial defensive operations. So I absolutely agree that forward station forces are essential to the viability of our strategy, and that we are under-postured, certainly in Europe, and to some degree in the Western Pacific as well, to meet the challenge.
Yeah, my time has expired. Do the rest of you generally agree with that statement? Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.